In trading, knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge in what you're doing can be costly, very costly. So you need a solid foundation of quality market education. Whether you're new to trading or a seasoned veteran looking to add advanced strategies to your arsenal, there's always something to learn and something to improve on. And now you can access the same knowledge that professional traders receive with Market Rebellion's Trading Education. I'm Bill Johnson, Head of Options Education here at Market Rebellion, and we've assembled a comprehensive curriculum based on decades of real trading experience, covering everything you need to know about trading options from beginner to advanced. We go way beyond the nuts and bolts of options theory to teach you how to apply specific trading strategies and the techniques needed to adapt your trades when markets shift. Regardless of your goals, you'll gain access to the education you need with easy-to-consume lessons so you can learn to trade with confidence, enhance your knowledge, and master the practical skills required for market success. So please join us for in-depth trading education only from Market Rebellion. Hey, welcome back, Market Rebels, and to all of our YouTubers. And Stu, guess what time it is?
Oh, it's that time again.
It is that time. Time for Coach's Corner. Our favorite topic, options, trading, stocks, you name it. We love to teach it. And you can take coaching right here from people just like Stu. But we love to show, usually kind of the slant that we have for Coach's Corner is to show the typical traps, misperceptions that people have, trying to give you some different insights to help you make better decisions. So today, cool topic for you, Stu.
Yeah.
Here's our little chalk talk question, which is our thought-provoking question for you to think of during the presentation. We'll come back and answer it. But what's the difference between risk and danger?
Yeah,
now, if you look it up in the dictionary, they might even say that they're synonyms. But in the financial markets, we actually make a distinction. And that's for you to think about out there on YouTube. Think about that. We'll come back and revisit that at the end. Okay, so what do you think our topic is for today? You got it.
There you go. Risk versus danger.
Risk versus danger. So let's start off with some definitions here. What is risk? Well, there's a lot of different definitions of risk, but one that I think is fairly simple for our purposes, it's a calculated gamble that we're doing for some reward. And we can say, even though we might not be able to precisely calculate it like we can for roulette, we can say, this is probably what's going to happen, or this is highly, highly unlikely. I'm willing to take that shot in exchange for some reward. And that's what we're doing. But we also know another favorite definition of risk, as we know from economist Elroy Dimpson, is what? More things can happen than will happen.
And so, let me might add that they do.
They do. We were just talking about it during the sound checks here with one of our trades.
And
it's just there are so many more things that could happen, but just because they don't, we overlook them. We don't think that those were possibilities.
Yeah,
and that's some of the risks that people end up putting themselves into.
Kind of goes back to something that I say often in my coaching is to look for the things that you really can't see.
Exactly
the things that you can, this is going to sound really stupid, but the things that you can see are the things that you're going to look at. Look for the things that you can't see.
Right.
And that's where you want to concentrate on your risk management skills.
Right. The things that you can see and can calculate aren't really risks. Because if you know about them, you can hedge them or just say, I just don't want to take that trade. Okay, that's easy, but that's because you know about it.
Yeah.
The things that are going to bite you are the things that nobody saw coming. And that's why it's important to get those things hedged beforehand and not after. What's one of the most common questions we get, Stu? How do I repair this trade? Right. Now that I'm down 100%, what can I do? What's our answer?
Nada.
Nada. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to place a second trade that makes up for those losses and call it a repair strategy, by all means, feel free to do so. But
Yeah.
a loss is a loss. So we want to make sure that we're hedging that stuff before it happens. And that's why we're here to talk about risks versus dangers. So we can identify risks and may be able to measure. All right, so that's another way of understanding the risk. We can usually identify them. And again, in some cases, we can definitely measure them. In other cases, we can at least get a pretty good handle on them. But that's what we're thinking of when we talk about risk. All right, now what about a danger? Well, again, in the dictionary, they're probably going to say, risk, danger, same thing. But in the financial markets, we like to separate them. And what we call a danger is a situation that can only expose you to losses, or at least mostly losses and very, very little reward. So what you're doing is you end up accepting risk for no reward or for very little. And if that's true, you are facing a danger. So again, you could step into a trade. Sometimes we call it an alligator spread, right? Where you pay $5 for a $5 spread or $4.95 for a $5 spread. That's a danger. It can really only expose you to losses. There's not much to talk about in terms of gains. That's a danger. So the thing is that with the dangers, you don't want to try to manage them. There's nothing to manage. It's just a big explosive device sitting in your account that cannot help you.
And one thing to remember here, everyone, is that you can have a current position,
right,
that you put on somewhere along the line, and
Yep.
it slides itself into the danger space.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
it's not like, oh, I'm going to put this on and it's a danger. I can't really make any money. So,
Right.
you can generally, it's going to be a position that you have that will slide into that space where you can't really make any more money on it, yet you have it on and you have downside risk, downside P&L risk, not directional risk.
That's exactly right.
And you have to be able to recognize that. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here.
Yeah, we're going to actually do an example of that. But I just mentioned this idea of alligator spreads. And so that's like, it's not really a strategy. We just kind of call it that if you're paying, let's say, $5 for a $5 spread. But of course, I would think most people would know not to do that. But what Stu is talking about, yeah, you might pay $2 for this vertical spread, but then it suddenly is trading for $4.95. So it doesn't matter what you paid for it.
Or 450
right
with a month to go, or something that just
right.
When you look at the just big, the big picture of things, it doesn't really pay anymore. It's like I have this position on. Would I enter it now?
Would I enter it now?
Like you probably wouldn't be paying 450 with a month to go for a $5 vertical spread. Maybe you would. I don't know. I don't think I would. But if you
question that you have to
and
answer.
You keep it on, it's the same thing as putting it on, because at the end of the day, you have it,
right,
and it is part of your risk profile.
Yeah, it's a question that you as the trader has to answer. And as Stu said, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. I think everybody agrees that a spread trading for a $5 spread would be dumb to hold. But would you hold it at 450? Some people might, some people won't. But the point is, don't do it because you said, oh, I paid $2 for it, and I want to make the maximum. It doesn't matter what you paid for it.
No.
Right now, if it's worth $4.90, it's as if you paid $4.90 for it. And now you have exposed yourself to a danger. So the problem is that some of the ones we just described seem pretty obvious. The problem for traders, though, is that they are often hidden. Mm-hmm. You were just talking about this. Think about the things that you can't see, and these are some of the things that we look at as traders, and that's what we want to share with you. Now, there's a lot of different potential dangers that can occur in the markets. For this presentation, we just want to introduce you to one to get the idea. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll do some others. So before we continue on, quick little plug here for everybody. Please remember, visit us, marketrebellion.com/get started. Lots of great articles, videos, topics just like this to help you make better decisions in the world of options and investing. So let's talk a little bit about, for our example here, a vertical spread. Let's say that you buy the 100-105 vertical. Now, to do that, you're going to buy the 100 call, and you will sell the 105 call. And let's just say that it's for a net debit of 3. All right, so we don't really know what the individual prices are. It could be 10 and 7, 5 and 2, but the net is 3. And so we know that the maximum gain is 2. That's just the difference in strikes minus the amount that you paid. So if we do this risk graph, what's it going to look like? Well, it's a vertical spread, so we know it has limited risk, limited reward. We should get a bend at the strikes. And so if we look at our risk graph, there it is. All right, so we get our bend at 100. That's our long 100 call. We get another one at 105. That's our short 105. That will always be true for all risk graphs. You will get a bend at every single strike in that position. So the blue curve is the expiration. What's this red one here?
That would be today.
That's today, sometimes called the current curve or the now curve, a lot of different terms that people use for it. But the idea is that, for instance, if let's say the stock is 110 at expiration, how much am I going to make from this spread? Well, I find 110 and I trace a line up to the blue because my question is what's going to happen at expiration. So I need to look at the expiration curve. And I look out to the left and it says you're going to make 2. What if the stock is 120? Trace a line up to the blue. I look, still going to make 2. What if the stock is right here? Looks like 103. Going to break even. Stock is 95. I'm going to lose 3. So that's how we read our risk graphs. These are just stock prices. The red curve shows us for today. So we can see that if the stock is 110, this is where a lot of traders say, how come I'm not making my full $2?
I was just going to go there.
It's because you're not at expiration. What you have to do is read off the red curve and say, I can only close right now for about $1 profit.
Or you're not up at 125 with,
or you're not up at 125 where you would exactly where the red.
So here's the thing, everyone, right? In my opinion, learning to draw, learning to read, learning to interpret risk graphs is one of the very best ways to learn what this game is all about.
Yep.
So if you've read, let's see, you've heard somewhere, you've read somewhere that you're going to do a vertical spread because you want to create a hedge, right? You heard that this was like a really cool way to go. So you put on this 100, 105 spread, and lo and behold, the stock goes from 100 to 107. And you're thinking that you should, like Bill said, you should have your $2 profit.
Right.
And you don't. But if you're practicing reading this,
yeah, you would know.
You then are obligating yourself to say, well, why isn't it 2? Yeah. See, that's how you learn.
Right.
It's not like, oh, it's not 2, this is wrong. I did it wrong. It's wrong. It's, somebody told me. It's none of that. It's why isn't it 2? And then you go figure it out. You ask, you get some coaching, you get, you just do a little more research and you figure out the answer why. And that's how you learn this.
Yeah, you got to keep digging for why. So the point is, the simple answer is you're not at expiration yet. That's the thing. The game's not over. So is it possible? Let's say the spread has 30 days to go. Is it completely inconceivable that the stock falls from 107 down to 100 and it expires worthless?
Well, wait a minute. My expiration is, out there. So shouldn't I just wait till expiration?
Well, there's the problem. There's the problem. If you want to wait until expiration, let's say it's 30 days to get that number, you've got waiting to do. The game's not over. And that means the stock could fall down here. That's why it's not worth the full $2.
See, that becomes part of your risk, right?
It absolutely is.
That piece is part of it. It's always been part of it. Maybe you didn't see it, or maybe you thought it would go away when the stock went to 107 through the 105 short strike. But it's there. It always was there, and it's not going away until the extrinsic value goes away, which it will at expiration, or if the thing skyrockets all the way to the moon and all of it's gone and everything's trading at parity.
Yep. So let's look further at this, because this is where we're going to find one of the hidden dangers. So if our stock goes out in this direction, and or if we're in this area and time is passing, this becomes our area of reward, right? Anything above our break even here. But if the stock moves in this direction, what happens? This now becomes our risk. All right, so that's pretty simple. We know that we need the stock to be up in this region. As time passes, that red line moves towards the blue, and we start getting closer and closer to our maximum reward. But now, let's say, as we talked about earlier, Stu, that the stock has moved way up here. We're still not at expiration. We could still have 30 days to go. But let's say the stock is up here somewhere. Now, I want everybody out there on YouTube to look at this and say, what's the difference between the red and the blue lines? Is it a lot? Is it a little? There's not much reward left. Look at how that little sliver of green in there.
You know what I might say to that? If you were testing me, and I might, if you were going to ask me that question, I might say $4.90.
That's, yeah.
And that would kind of be my answer. Like what
you're gonna find out it's a pretty good guess. So anyway, what this is what? It doesn't matter what you paid for it. We would call this a danger. So as Stu said earlier, it's not that we started as a danger, we have moved into it. So you could go back to saying, would I pay, hypothetically, let's say it's $4.90, would I pay $4.90 for this spread right now? Hopefully not. Well, then why are you holding it for $4.90? So you have the choice to hit sell and put $4.90 in your pocket. And by choosing to say, nope, I'm not going to sell, that's the same thing mathematically as saying I'm willing to buy it right now for $4.90.
Absolutely, 100%.
Right, and for people who don't believe that, how can you prove it? Sell it for $4.90, turn right around and buy it back for $4.90, and you're in exactly the same spot that you were.
Nothing changed. Well,
nothing changed other than the fact that you triggered a trade, but it helps people to say, yes, I am holding it for $4.90.
And you contributed to the P&L of your brokerage.
Big time. Right. So now, understanding what a danger is, let's take a look at a specific example with one of our favorite strategies, stock replacement. All right, so remember that the stock replacement strategy, we are going to buy a deep in the money call. Generally, it's going to be somewhere around an 80 to 85 delta. And the reason we do that is that it makes the call behave about like shares of stock. However, we're going to get a sharply reduced cost. A lot of times, unless you're in a real high vol environment or a super high price stock with a big cost of carry, you're usually going to be like 3 or 4 to 1. So like even with the S&P 500 with a SPY, you can go out 6 months or a year and probably get it at a fourth of the price of the SPY. And yet it's going to behave just about like shares of stock. So that's the stock replacement strategy. So let's do an example. Let's say that our stock is 100. You buy a 180-day $70 call for $31.50. Now these prices that I'm using from here forward are from a pricing model. So they're not just made up and cherry picked to make the example work. This is theoretically how the options would play out. So notice that we are paying $31.50 or could pay $31.50 instead of 100. It's about a third. Right? It's 32%, roughly a third or 3 to 1 leverage. But now let's say the stock rises to 110. Just what you were talking about. We didn't start out as a danger, but the stock moved in this example in our favor. And now the pricing model says that that $70 call is worth $40.70. All right. So a lot of it is intrinsic value. 40 bucks. There's only a 70-cent option here. Now our call option increased to $9.20. Okay, so we can see now. Keep that 40.70 right there in mind. All right, that's the current cost of the call. So here is our 70 call. There's our bend. Now the stock is way up here at 110. The question is, where's the danger? I don't see a danger. We're just in the money. Everything's going great. Let me just continue to hold it. Where is the danger? See, this is such a great example because it's hidden. It's not an obvious one where you're paying 5 for a spread or that it's moved to a value of 5. It's hidden, but it's there just as much, just as real. So we know that this is our benefit down here, is this flat part, right? But let's look at some other ways of keeping this flat, other ways of staying in the stock replacement strategy. And before we do that, quick reminder, marketrebellion.com/get started.
Lots of really cool videos, articles there, topics very similar to what we talk about in here that can help you to further get started with your options trading. So one of the big benefits that we have with options, long call, at least long calls, long puts, is that we can roll them. So what rolling is, here's our 70 call, there's our bend. As the stock moves up, I can sell my current call and I can swap it out, let's say, for the 75 call. And what that does is it shifts this maximum loss up. Sometimes we like to talk about it as taking money off the table, as kind of a throwback to Vegas when people would say, you know, we've made some winnings, let's take some of the money and throw it back in the hotel room so we've at least got something to show for it. But we still maintain virtually the same upside. But now the question is, how do we do this, Stu? How do we go from 70 to 75?
I'm going to go to the option store and I'm going to trade it in.
Exactly. And here's how we trade it in. Remember, we started with the 70 call. So we're long the 70 call plus 70. And we are going to sell the 70 call and buy the 75. As Stu said, we're going to go to the store and swap it out. Well, that's what I'm doing with this first trade here in red. I'm selling my 70 call. And then I want to say, all right, I don't want to have no calls. I want to replace it with the 75. But what is this trade? We're going to do this as a simultaneous trade in our broker's platform. What is that guy called right there?
Looks like a vertical to me.
That is a vertical. We're going to sell that vertical. So we're right back into a vertical. We are selling the 70, buying the 75. Now, remember that there is a little pricing principle at work here. For the same expiration, lower strike calls have to be worth more money because they give you the right to pay less for the stock. So if you are selling the lower strike, the 70, and buying the 75, it absolutely will produce a credit. And that's what's shifting that line higher. So notice that once we sell this spread, what happens? Those cancel. And now we are just on a net basis holding a 75 call. So the trick is we're going to sell vertical spreads. We're going to always generate credits and continually walk that risk graph up. So notice what we actually did, and this is why it's hidden. We really have a 70-75 vertical down here. See, I could get this same risk graph in black by buying the 70-75 vertical and then buying the 75-80. The 75s cancel. I'm just going to have the 80. And then I could buy the 80-85 and the 85-90, and I could keep walking up and create that same risk graph just by buying verticals. Those interior ones are just going to cancel. But does anybody see a vertical in that? No, it's hidden. So now the question is, when should you sell a vertical spread, Stu? Now we're right back to the opening slide.
So, you know, this is where people kind of get messed up a little bit. This is always the answer. I mean, this is always the question, you know, where should I sell it?
Where do I do it?
Sell it? Should I do it as separate transactions? So, you know, it really comes back to very, very basic options 101 stuff. It's all about the intrinsic and the extrinsic value. That's all it is. It's just about the cash that's sitting there. And is it working for me or is it a danger? Right? You have that intrinsic value in the 70s. You also have, remember the stock? Where was the stock? Where'd you put the stock here?
110.
110, right? So you got $40 worth of intrinsic value. The 75s, they're also in the money as well, right?
Yes,
it's
they
a very
are.
similar option.
They're not right.
$5 less of intrinsic value. So
they're still deep in the money.
Let's try and capture that money. Now, are we going to get all of it?
Not unless you're at expiration.
Get all of it because there's no one that's going to be willing to pay, like Bill said, $5 for a $5 spread. There's no benefit. No. There has to be an economic benefit,
right,
or a perceived economic benefit to do a trade. So, you know, unless somebody's making a mistake, they're not really going to do that. However, you might get pretty close. Right, so, you might get pretty close, and there's reasons behind that. It has to do with the put side of things, but you know, like if the put spread is trading for, you know, let's say 15 cents, then I'm going to eliminate cost of carry. You know, you might be able to unwind that for 480.
Yeah,
there's actually a $5 arb in there for somebody else to pick up. You don't need that nickel. You just want to get rid of the risk
Correct.
and take the intrinsic value off the table. And the benefit is that, well, you take your money, but really from the risk side from the graph side of things, you're shifting that green line higher, because you're going from a 70 exit space to a 75 exit space. And that's
Right.
good. That's really good.
Yep. So let's do that. Let's do an example here. If we remember that the $70 call was trading for $40.70. Remember, that's according to a pricing model with the stock at 110. But now we know, even though we don't see it, that there is a 70-75 vertical hiding down here. All right, because I could create that black line by buying the 70-75, the 75-80, the 85-90, and so on. I would create that black line. So it is there, it's just hidden. So the question now, what do you suppose that spread is worth? As Stu said, well, the 70 call is in the money, deep in the money, and so is the 75. So if you think back to that one of the earlier slides, when that stock is way up here in that vertical spread, we might be getting pretty close to 5. And shouldn't that be something we should check as a risk manager? See, most people don't. They go, I don't know where's the danger. Why am I even worried about it? Everything's going in my favor. Well, let's look at it. Well, what do you suppose the pricing model says that spread's worth, Stu? You gave it a good guess. That's a hint for you.
480, 490.
Pricing model says 490.
There you go.
Now, could it be 480? Sure. Pump up volatility or increase time. But the point is, it's always relative. Is 110 deep in the money? Well, if we had 3 years to go at 80% volatility, no.
No.
This might be a 350 spread or it'd be much, much less. So it's all relative, but the point is you need to understand roughly the areas of when to check. So now that we've identified this spread, what are we doing? We are mathematically holding the 70-75 vertical for 490. But it's hidden. You're going to look and say, wait a minute, I'm looking at my platform. I don't own any vertical spreads in here. Yes, you do. Synthetically, you do. And so this guy down here in red is, you guessed it, a danger. Why do we want this vertical spread sitting in our account that's worth 490? We don't. So what do? Get it out of there. Close it. So we get a net,
chuck it to the curb.
Chuck it to the curb, but we might as well get paid for it. We're going to get a nice credit of 490. Our cost basis, remember, we originally paid 3150. We subtract out the 490, so now it's 2660. So what we've done is we went from a 70 call right there at 3150. We sold the vertical spread, and now there it is. See, it's hidden, but it really is there. We now have a cost basis of 2660, and yet our deltas really didn't change up here. Why? Because that vertical spread was so deep in the money. It was nothing but a danger. It was not helping us at all.
Yeah, there's all kinds of tells in this. You can look at the extrinsics on this. You're going to see different. You can just look at the pricing of it and you can see the 10-cent difference.
Sure. You and I would just look at the quotes. We'd be able to tell that that's pretty close.
It's all over the place, but you got to know to look for it.
You have to at least know. Right, we could look at the quotes and say it's not even worth looking at right now. Or we'd say, you know what, it's getting pretty close. Let's do a little more digging here. But the thing is that we would still have our current curve, but now we've moved up here. And now we've retained manageable risk. See, you don't want to retain this risk because, again, Stu, what can you do to manage a danger? Nothing.
Get rid of it.
Right. Well, okay. That's a good answer. But assuming it's still in your account, there's nothing you can do. Right. You can't manage that risk other than just closing it. Mm-hmm. So why do we want that in there? We don't. What we want to do is to retain the manageable risk. But we've done is we've retained that, but we've eliminated the danger down here. So that's really the real reason, the long version, when we tell people this is time to roll. This is one of the things that we're looking at. What's that bottom spread there? Bottom spread being the strike that you're long, and my first example was 70. I'm going to look at the 70-75 vertical.
Here's a great example of how this applies to the real world. So Bill and I For those of you who don't know, we actually run a subscription service. It's called Instant Cash Flow through Market Rebellion, and we have one of our trades that we do in the service is like what he's talking about here, the stock replacement. And many times when you have these stock replacements, there are a lot of intrinsic dollars, and many times the spreads are fairly wide. Sometimes not, and sometimes they are. And the stocks that move in our favor, luckily, are most of them at some point. It becomes time to roll the option.
And this is why.
And this is what's going on. So Bill says, so here's the conversation that Bill and I have with between the two of us. So we have on the SPG April 160 call. Stu, is it time to roll it yet? So what does Stu do? Stu goes immediately to the put side of it and looks at where the put side is trading.
Yep.
Then I determine if it's ready to roll. It may not be readily apparent by looking at spreads that are $2 wide,
right,
in the call set, but I can look at it because I know that danger is there, and I can determine if the price point is applicable to taking that off, right, or does the position that I currently have on maintain an element of risk where I can make an amount of money still that warrants the risk that I'm taking.
Warrants the risk. That's what it's all about. Yeah. Correct. Yep. And so now what Stu described by looking at the put side, that's a little more complicated, actually quite a lot more complicated. It takes a lot more discussion. This at least hopefully introduces you to the idea.
Yeah, to the idea, right?
But if you're really serious about options, trading, investing, as you should be, as we try to show that there's a lot of moving parts with options and strategies, it's not just about up or down. Give us a call at Market Rebellion. You can find it at marketrebellion.com. You can find a phone number there, and you can hook up with Stu and get one-on-one coaching and find out things like this, or what's he looking at when he's looking at the puts. That's a shortcut. Takes a little more discussion, but he can go through this whole presentation and that fast look at the puts and tell you yes or no. Yeah, that's how we're figuring out if it's time to roll.
In about 3 seconds, you just kind of look at it, and
Yeah, and if you look at most people, that's one of the most common questions we get. How do you know when it's time to roll? And so we would encourage you, check it out. There are discussions worth having. It makes things a lot easier. And when things are easy and you can identify risks and dangers, it makes you more confident in your trading.
And the bottom line is it makes you a better trader.
Oh, for sure. That's what trading is all about.
It makes you a better, and that's what Bill and I try and do with these. We try our very best to give you ways to make you better.
What's one of our favorite quotes? We had a interview with Steve Levitt, who you had the honor of working with down on the floor at the Philly floor. What did he tell us? I asked him for a little pearl of wisdom to leave our readers with, and what was his quote?
Know your risk.
3 words. Out of all the history of being a market maker and specialist on the Philly floor, he sat back and he thought and quickly came up. He said, know your risk.
And that sums it all up.
How can you know your risk if you're holding on to dangers that you don't know are there?
Mm-hmm.
So back to our square one here, Chalk Talk question. What's the difference between risk and danger? So hopefully we've answered that for you. But again, risk is something that we can calculate. Playing roulette is risky. We can calculate the probabilities and the odds. Flipping a coin is risky. But we can say, here's what you should be paying for it. Here's what you can expect. But a danger is something different. And with a danger, you're just saying, there's no benefit for me, but yet I could take a big loss. And if the point is you don't want dangers, hopefully now for obvious reasons, sitting in your account. So we hope that gave you some good things to think about. And we appreciate you taking the time to visit us here again with Coach's Corner. And we'll look for you next Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, with our next Coach's Corner. And we'll see you then.
See ya.